The wind screamed through the empty streets like a wounded animal. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, blanketing everything in white silence. The kind of night where even the desperate stayed indoors, where the city itself seemed to hold its breath. Outside the shuttered doors of St. Catherine's Medical Center, a bundle shifted against the frozen concrete. A cry pierced the howling wind, weak, barely human. Then silence. The blanket, thin, soaked through, rose and fell with shallow breaths. Tiny fingers, already turning blue, clutched at nothing. The baby's lips were pale, the color draining from skin that should have been pink and warm. Time crawled. Minutes felt like hours. No one came. The city had forgotten this corner. The clinic had closed 3 hours ago. The streets were a graveyard of abandoned cars and darkened windows. Another cry, weaker this time. Then headlights cut through the storm. A black Mercedes S-Class slowed as it passed, then stopped abruptly. The engine idled, exhaust rising into the frigid air like ghosts. Inside, Alexander Crowe sat frozen at the wheel. He wasn't supposed to be here. This route wasn't on his way home. He'd taken a wrong turn 20 minutes ago, too distracted by the board meeting that had run until midnight, too angry at shareholders who questioned his decisions, too tired to care about anything beyond the glass and steel fortress he called home. But something made him look. Through the snow, through the darkness, he saw the bundle. His driver's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sir, is everything all right?" Alexander didn't answer. He was already opening the door. The cold hit him like a physical blow. His $1,000 suit offered no protection. Snow clung to his hair, his shoulders, but he didn't notice. He walked toward the entrance, each step crunching in the fresh powder. And then he saw it. Not just a bundle, a baby. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. He dropped to his knees, the ice soaking through his pants. His hands that signed billion-dollar deals, that never shook, trembled as he pulled back the blanket. A face, so small, eyes closed, skin like paper, but breathing, still breathing. That's when he saw the note. Pinned to the blanket with a safety pin, the paper was already damp, the ink running, but the words were clear enough. 3 words that would change everything. No one's child.
Alexander's breath caught in his throat. His hand moved to the note, fingers brushing the paper. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across his face. Not shock, not pity, recognition. "Sir!" His driver had gotten out, was rushing toward him. "Sir, we need to call." "Get the car, now." "But the authorities, now." Alexander scooped up the baby with surprising gentleness. The child barely moved, the cries gone silent. Too silent. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around the tiny body, creating a cocoon of warmth and expensive fabric. The baby's face disappeared into Italian wool and silk lining. "Drive to Mercy General, emergency entrance. Don't slow down for anything." The driver knew better than to argue. Within seconds, they were moving, the car fishtailing slightly on the ice before the tires caught and they shot forward into the night. Alexander cradled the baby against his chest, feeling the faint heartbeat through layers of cloth. So fragile, so impossibly small. He stared down at the note still clutched in his other hand. "No one's child," he read again. His jaw tightened. His eyes, normally cold, calculating, devoid of anything resembling emotion, burned with something fierce and terrible. He brought the baby closer, lowered his head until his lips nearly touched the blanket, and he whispered the words that would seal both their fates. "You are mine now." Mercy General Hospital's emergency entrance erupted into chaos. "I need a doctor, now." Alexander's voice cut through the quiet waiting area like a knife. Nurses looked up, startled. A security guard started forward, ready to intercept this wild-eyed man in a ruined suit carrying a bundle. Then they saw what he was carrying. "Oh my God," a nurse gasped. "Is that a baby found outside St. Catherine's, not breathing well, hypothermic, move." The nurse didn't need to be told twice. She hit a button, and suddenly the hallway filled with people in scrubs, a gurney appearing out of nowhere. "Sir, I need you to—" "No." Alexander's voice was flat, absolute. He didn't release the baby. "Sir, we can't help if you don't. I'll carry the child in. You lead." There was something in his tone, something that said arguing would be useless. The nurse exchanged a glance with the doctor who'd appeared beside her, Dr. Sarah Chen, head of pediatric emergency medicine, and Dr. Chen nodded once. "Room 3, now." They moved as a unit down the hallway, Alexander in the center, still cradling the baby like it was made of glass. Other patients in the waiting area stared as the group rushed past. Inside the examination room, Alexander finally, carefully, laid the baby on the table. The medical team swarmed immediately. Hands moved with practice efficiency, checking vitals, placing monitors, starting an IV line in a vein so small Alexander could barely see it. Temperatures 89 degrees, severe hypothermia. Heart rates weak but steady. Breathing shallow. "Get me warming blankets, now, and I need a full blood panel." Alexander stood back, pressed against the wall, watching everything. His hands were clenched at his sides, his breathing controlled but rapid. Dr. Chen worked with smooth precision, but her face was grim. "How long was the baby out there?" she asked, not looking away from her work. "I don't know. The blanket was soaked through. Could have been hours." "Hours?" Chen's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. "In this weather?" "But the baby's alive. That's what matters." Chen met his eyes then, saw something there that made her pause. "Sir, I need to call Child Protective Services. This is an abandoned infant. Protocol requires." "No." The word hung in the air like a threat. "Sir, I don't think you understand. This isn't optional. We have legal—" "Doctor?" Alexander's voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. "How much does this hospital need? For the new pediatric wing you've been fighting for? 3 million? 5? The room went silent.
Chen's face flushed. "Are you trying to bribe me?" "I'm trying to save a life. That baby has no one, no records, no family that cared enough to bring the child inside. But I'm standing here and I'm telling you that child has someone now. Me. This is highly irregular. Is the baby stable?" Chen hesitated. "For now, but we need to run more tests, need to keep the baby under observation for at least 48 hours. Then do it. Run every test, spare no expense. I'll cover all costs, cash, today. And when my attorney arrives, you'll see that everything is legal and proper. Sir, my name is Alexander Crowe." The name landed like a bomb. Chen's eyes widened, even the nurses paused. Everyone knew that name. "Mr. Crowe," Chen said carefully, "even with your resources, you can't just adopt a child in an emergency room. Watch me." He pulled out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. "Marcus, I need you at Mercy General, emergency entrance. Bring every contract for emergency guardianship you can think of, and I need you here in 30 minutes, not an hour." He hung up without waiting for a response. Then he turned back to Chen. "Do your job, doctor. Save that baby. I'll handle everything else." Chen looked at him for a long moment, then at the baby on the table, now wrapped in warming blankets, color slowly, very slowly returning to that tiny face. "Stay with this story," Alexander said quietly, though he was talking to no one in particular. Chen's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? But Alexander didn't answer. He was staring at the baby, his face carved from stone, his hands still trembling slightly at his sides. And in his pocket, the note, damp and crumpled, seemed to burn against his leg. No one's child. He'd known those words before he'd even read them. If you've ever felt invisible, stay with me and make sure you're subscribed. This story isn't what it seems. Marcus Reed arrived in 27 minutes. He burst through the emergency room doors with a briefcase in one hand and a tablet in the other, his tie slightly askew, the only sign that he'd been pulled from bed at 2 a.m. Alexander met him in the hallway outside rooms. "Tell me this is a joke," Marcus said without preamble. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Marcus studied his oldest friend's face, the snow still melting in his hair, the ruined suit, the wild-looking eyes that were usually cold as winter itself. Christ, Alex, what have you done? I found a baby outside St. Catherine's, abandoned. And your first thought was to call me instead of 911? I called you because I need papers, emergency guardianship, temporary custody, whatever makes this legal. Legal? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You can't legally claim a random baby you found on the street. That's not how the system works. Then make it work. Alex, listen to me very carefully. I've been your attorney for 15 years. I've helped you acquire companies. Marcus Reed arrived in 27 minutes. He burst through the emergency room doors with a briefcase in one hand and a tablet in the other, his tie slightly askew, the only sign that he'd been pulled from bed at 2 a.m. Alexander met him in the hallway outside rooms. Tell me this is a joke, Marcus said without preamble. Do I look like I'm joking? Marcus studied his oldest friend's face, the snow still melting in his hair, the ruined suit, the wild-looking eyes that were usually cold as winter itself. Christ, Alex, what have you done? I found a baby outside St. Catherine's, abandoned. And your first thought was to call me instead of 911? I called you because I need papers, emergency guardianship, temporary custody, whatever makes this legal. Legal? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You can't legally claim a random baby you found on the street. That's not how the system works. Then make it work. Alex, listen to me very carefully. I've been your attorney for 15 years. I've helped you acquire companies, destroy competitors, and build an empire. But this is different. This is a human being, not a hostile takeover. I know what this is. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're acting like a man who's lost his mind. I'm acting like a man who knows an opportunity when he sees one. An opportunity? Marcus's voice rose. This is a baby, not a business deal. I'm aware of that. Are you? Because the Alex Crowe I know doesn't do charity, doesn't do compassion. Hell, you fired your own nephew last year for missing quarterly targets. He was embezzling. He was family. He was stealing. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating off him. You have no family, Alex. You spent 20 years making sure of that. No wife, no children, no one who can stand to be in a room with you for more than an hour. And now you want to adopt a baby you found in the snow. Alexander's jaw tightened. Yes. Why? That's not your concern. It damn well is my concern when you're asking me to put my license on the line for whatever this is. They stared at each other. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. Alexander spoke quietly, but there was steel beneath the words. I want that baby, Marcus. I will have that baby. The only question is whether you help me do it legally or whether I find someone else who will. Marcus closed his eyes. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Another long silence. Then Marcus picked up his briefcase. This is insane. You know that, right? Note it. And it's going to be complicated, very complicated. Child Services will investigate. There will be home visits, psychological evaluations, background checks. I'll pass all of them. They'll ask why you want this specific child, why now, after 43 years of being the most emotionally unavailable bastard in New York. Alexander didn't flinch. Then I'll tell them the truth, which is that I'm the only one who stopped. Marcus stared at him. That's not going to be enough. It'll have to be. Inside room 3, Dr. Chin was updating the baby's chart when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. The text was from the hospital administrator. Cooperate fully with Mr. Crowe. Whatever he needs. Board's orders.
She looked through the window at Alexander, standing in the hallway with his attorney, both men locked in what appeared to be an intense conversation. One of the nurses, Jenna, young, idealistic, appeared at her shoulder. "Is it true? That he's trying to adopt the baby?" Jenna whispered. "Apparently. Can he do that? With enough money and lawyers? Probably. But should he?" Jen didn't answer. She was watching Alexander through the glass, the way he kept glancing toward room 3, like he was checking to make sure the baby was still there, still real. "Do you know who Alexander Crowe is?" Chen asked quietly. "Rich guy, right? Billionaire, made his fortune in hostile takeovers. They call him the Ice King in business journals. He once shut down a factory of 2,000 people because the quarterly numbers were off by 3%. Jesus! He's ruthless, calculating. There are stories about him that would make your skin crawl. Then why? That's what I want to know." Chin's eyes narrowed. "Men like him don't do anything without a reason, and they definitely don't rescue random babies from snowstorms." "Maybe he's changed," Chin snorted. "People don't change, not people like him." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it, because she'd seen his face when he carried that baby in, had seen something in his eyes that looked almost like fear. Not fear of the baby, fear for it. At 4 a.m., the paperwork was done. Marcus had pulled strings, called in favors, and performed what he privately considered legal miracles. Emergency temporary guardianship, pending full investigation by Child Protective Services. It would last 72 hours, during which time Alexander would need to prove his fitness as a guardian. "This is temporary," Marcus emphasized for the 3rd time. "Temporary. They'll assign a caseworker, probably tomorrow, and that person is going to ask a lot of very hard questions. I'll answer them. Will you? Because I've got some questions of my own, Alex, like what the hell happened to you between midnight and now?" Alexander was signing the final document, his signature, normally a quick slash of authority, careful and deliberate. "I didn't do anything." "Bullshit. I've known you since law school. I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" "Scared." Alexander's pen paused for just a second, then continued. "I'm not scared. You're terrified. I can see it." Alexander set down the pen and looked at his friend, really looked at him. "Do you remember what I told you that night senior year after the accident?" Marcus's face changed. "Alex, do you remember what I said? That's ancient history. I said I would never let it happen again, that I would never be that weak, that unprepared. And you haven't been. You've built walls so high that God himself couldn't climb them." "Exactly." Alexander's voice was flat. "So when I tell you that this baby needs me, believe me when I say I know what I'm talking about." "How can you possibly know that?" Alexander stood, gathering the papers. "Because I read the note, Marcus, and I know what it means. It said no one's child. That could mean anything. It means exactly what I think it means."
Which is. But Alexander was already walking away, back toward room 3. Marcus watched him go, a cold feeling settling in his gut. He'd known Alexander Crowe for 25 years, had seen him destroy companies, break competitors, show absolutely zero mercy in business or personal dealings. But he'd never, not once, seen him care about anything. Until tonight. Whatever was happening here, whatever had triggered the sudden transformation, Marcus had a sinking feeling it was going to end badly. Very badly. Alexander stood at the window of room 3, watching the baby sleep under warming blankets. The color had returned. Vital signs were stable. Dr. Chen had said the baby would survive. Would survive. Those words echoed in his head like a mantra. He pulled out the note from his pocket, the paper now dry but wrinkled. No one's child. His hand closed around it, crumpling it further. 23 years. 23 years since he'd seen those words, since he'd failed to act fast enough, since he'd believed that someone else would handle it, since he'd lost everything. Not again, he thought. Never again. Behind him, Marcus was on his phone, probably calling in more favors, smoothing over more impossible situations.
But Alexander wasn't thinking about the lawyers or the paperwork or the challenges ahead. He was thinking about a different night, a different baby, a different note, and the promise he'd made in the dark when there was no one left to hear it. "If I ever get another chance," he'd sworn, "I won't hesitate. I won't fail. Never again." He pressed his hand against the glass. "You are mine now," he whispered again, "and I'm going to make sure you survive more than just tonight. I'm going to make sure you survive everything." Don't step away here. Subscribe, because the truth you're about to hear is the one he's been running from his whole life.
She recognized the dismissal, the wall slamming back into place. "Tomorrow, if the final tests come back clean," she paused, "Child Services will want to do a home visit within the week. I'll be ready. And you'll need to name the baby for the temporary custody papers." Alexander stopped at the door. "What?" "A name, Mr. Crowe. The baby needs a name." He stood there, hand on the doorknob, suddenly frozen. A name? Of course. Children needed names. "I'll think about it," he managed. "Don't think too long. The paperwork needs to be filed by end of business tomorrow." That night, Alexander sat in the hospital's family waiting area at 2 a.m., the same time he'd arrived 3 nights ago. The room was empty, except for him and a vending machine humming in the corner. In his hands, a blank piece of paper and a pen. "Choose a name," Marcus had texted him. "Something strong, something that means survival." But Alexander couldn't write anything. Every name he thought of felt wrong. Too common, too meaningful, too much like he was trying to replace something that couldn't be replaced. His phone buzzed. Marcus again. How about Phoenix, rising from the ashes and all that? Alexander typed back. Too obvious. Adrian? It means strong. Too common. You're overthinking this. I'm thinking exactly enough. He set down the phone and stared at the blank paper. What do you name a child who's already survived death, who was meant to be nobody but became yours? His mind drifted back to the note. No one's child. 3 words that haunted him. 3 words he'd seen before, in different handwriting, on a different night. 23 years ago, when he was 20 years old and stupid enough to believe someone else would fix things. That baby had been named, had been loved, had died anyway. Alexander closed his eyes, pushing back memories that still felt like knives. When he opened them, he wrote a single word on the paper. Evan. It meant young warrior, someone who fights even when the odds are impossible. It felt right. He texted Marcus. Evan. The response came immediately. Good choice. Strong, clean. I'll have the papers ready. Alexander looked toward the nursery where Evan was sleeping, monitored by machines and watched by nurses who still didn't trust him. Evan, he said aloud, testing it. A young warrior who'd already fought off hypothermia, abandonment, and death. A child who'd been no one's and now was his. Evan Crowe, he whispered. And for the first time in 23 years, Alexander felt something crack in the ice around his heart. 7 years later. Again. Evan's small hands gripped the pencil tighter, knuckles white with effort. The math problem stared back at him. Multiplication, 3 digits, carrying numbers. I did it 3 times already. Evan, and you'll do it a 4th time until you get it right. Alexander stood behind him in the study, a massive room of dark wood and leather-bound books. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, but the curtains were drawn. They were always drawn during study time. Evan was 7 now, small for his age, with dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for his face. He wore a uniform even at home, khaki pants, white shirt, navy sweater. Alexander's insistence. If I get it right this time, can I watch TV? You can't negotiate with mathematics, Evan. I'm not negotiating, I'm asking. The answer is no. TV is for weekends. This is Tuesday. Evan's shoulders slumped. He returned to the problem, working through it mechanically. Alexander watched, arms crossed. He saw the mistake immediately. Evan had added instead of multiplying in the second step, but he didn't point it out. Evan needed to find his own errors. That was how you learned, through failure and correction. It was how Alexander had built an empire. It would be how Evan survived this world. Done, Evan said. Alexander checked the paper. Wrong. Third step. But look again. Evan stared at the numbers. His eyes were filling with tears, but he blinked them back. Crying wasn't allowed during study time. Crying was unproductive. He found the error, fixed it, slid the paper back. Now it's done. Alexander checked it. Perfect. Good. 20 more problems. Then you can have dinner. 20? Evan's voice cracked. But I said you do them until you got them right. You got one right. That's luck. It's not fair. Fair is a concept for people who don't want to win. Evan's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Alexander thought the boy might argue, might push back. Part of him hoped Evan would, but Evan just picked up his pencil and started the next problem. Alexander felt something twist in his chest. Pride? Disappointment? He couldn't tell anymore. He left the room without another word. In the kitchen, Mrs. Chin, no relation to the doctor but just as efficient, was preparing dinner. "How is he?" she asked, not looking up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Fine. You've had him in that study for 3 hours, Mr. Crowe. He needs to learn discipline. He's 7. Exactly. Old enough to understand that success requires sacrifice." Mrs. Chin set down her knife. She'd been with them for 5 years, hired when Evan was 2. She'd seen Alexander at his hardest and coldest, but she'd also seen the moments late at night when he stood outside Evan's door, just listening to the boy breathe. "Permission to speak freely, sir? When has that ever stopped you? That boy worships you, follows every rule you set, never complains, never rebels. Do you know how rare that is? I raised him properly. You raised him scared." Alexander's eyes snapped to her. "Excuse me? He's scared of disappointing you, scared of not being perfect. That's not discipline, Mr. Crowe. That's fear. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you prepared. Fear keeps you alone." The words hit harder than they should have. Alexander turned away. His education is not your concern. His happiness should be someone's concern. He'll be happy when he's successful. Will he? Or will he be like you? The kitchen went silent. Mrs. Chin had crossed a line and they both knew it, but she didn't apologize. Alexander walked out without responding. That night, after Evan was asleep, Alexander stood in the doorway of the boy's room. Evan slept like he did everything else, perfectly still, perfectly controlled. Even in sleep, he didn't sprawl or snore, didn't have nightmares or cry out. Alexander had made sure of that, had trained the chaos out of him early. But as he watched, he wondered, as he did every night, if Mrs. Chin was right. Had he saved Evan from the cold 7 years ago, only to create a different kind of winter inside him? He thought about the note still locked in his office safe. No one's child. Evan was his child now, legally, completely, undeniably. But did Evan know that? Really know it? Or did he just know the rules, the expectations, the endless drills of perfection? Alexander's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Love without truth creates cracks," a voice whispered in his head. He pushed it away. Truth was dangerous. Truth was the thing that destroyed everything. Better to have rules, structure, safety, even if it meant distance, even if it meant Evan looked at him with respect but never warmth, even if it meant that 7 years later, Alexander still hadn't told the boy where he really came from, or why.
If you're feeling the weight of this story, hit that like button, because what happens next will change everything between them. And don't forget to subscribe. This journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss where it goes. 3 years later, Evan was 10 when the past came knocking. It started with a school assignment. "We're doing a family history project," Evan announced at dinner. He sat across from Alexander at the long dining table, the distance between them feeling like miles. Alexander looked up from his tablet. "What kind of project?" "We have to create a family tree, go back at least 3 generations, interview relatives, find old photos." Evan pushed his food around his plate. "Everyone's really excited about it." "I see." "Mrs. Patterson said it's important to know where we come from." Alexander set down his tablet with deliberate care. "Your teacher said that." "Yeah, she said our history shapes who we are." "Your teacher is idealistic." "Is that bad?" "It's incomplete." Alexander took a sip of wine. "History is useful for learning patterns, not for defining identity." Evan frowned. "But don't you want to know about your grandparents, your great-grandparents?" "I know everything I need to know." "Which is?" "That they're dead." The bluntness hit Evan like a slap. He'd learned over the years that Alexander didn't do sentiment, didn't do nostalgia, but this felt different, harsher. "What about your parents?" Evan pressed. "Were they?" "Dead. Car accident. I was 19. "Oh." Evan's voice got smaller. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was 30 years ago." "But still." "Evan." Alexander's tone was final. "The past is not a place worth visiting. Focus on the future. That's where success lives." "But the assignment." "I'll write a note to your teacher. You'll do an alternate project." "Everyone else is doing the family tree." "Then you'll stand out. That's good." "It's not good. It's weird." The words burst out before Evan could stop them. "Everyone already thinks I'm weird because I don't have a mom, because I live in this giant house, because you won't let me do anything normal kids do." Alexander's expression didn't change. "Normal is average. Average is failure." "Maybe I want to be normal." "Then you'd be disappointing yourself, not just me." Evan's face flushed. He stood up, chair scraping against the floor. "May I be excused?" "You haven't finished your dinner." "I'm not hungry." "Sit down." The command in Alexander's voice was absolute. Evan sat, but his jaw was clenched, his eyes bright with unshed tears. They finished dinner in silence. Later that night, Evan lay in bed staring at the ceiling. A family tree. 3 generations. He didn't even have one. Alexander never talked about family, never mentioned parents, siblings, cousins. Christmas was just another day. Birthdays were acknowledged with gifts, but no celebration. And Evan himself? He knew he was adopted. Alexander had told him that much when he was 6, in the same tone he might use to explain a business merger. "You were abandoned. I found you. Now you're mine." No details, no story, just facts. But Evan had questions, so many questions. Who were his real parents? Why did they leave him? Was there something wrong with him? Did they ever think about him? Did they regret it? He'd never ask Alexander these things, partly because he knew he wouldn't get answers, partly because he was afraid of what those answers might be. But now, with this assignment looming, the questions felt impossible to ignore. Evan slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway in bare feet. Alexander's study was at the end of the hall. The door was closed, but light seeped underneath. He was still working, always working. Evan raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What would he even say? "Tell me about the night you found me. Tell me why someone threw me away. Tell me if you ever wished you just kept driving." His hand dropped. He turned to go back to his room and saw something. The study door wasn't quite closed. A sliver of space remained, just enough to see through if you stood at the right angle. Evan knew he shouldn't look. knew it was an invasion of privacy, knew Alexander would be furious if he caught him, but he looked anyway. Inside, Alexander sat at his desk, but he wasn't working. He was holding something small, a piece of paper yellowed with age, and his face, Evan had never seen that expression before. Pain, raw and terrible. Alexander stared at the paper like it was a wound that had never healed. Then he did something that made Evan's blood run cold. He spoke to it. "I'm doing better this time," Alexander whispered. "I swear I am." Silence. "He's safe. He's strong. He'll survive anything." More silence. "I know it's not enough. I know I'm—" His voice cracked. "I know I'm failing him the same way I failed you." Evan's heart pounded. Who was Alexander talking to? "But I can't tell him. If I tell him, he'll know. He'll know what I am, what I did." Alexander's hands shook. "And he'll hate me, just like you would have." He folded the paper carefully, almost reverently, and locked it in his desk drawer. Then he put his head in his hands and sat there, completely still, for a long time. Evan backed away from the door, his whole body trembling. He ran back to his room, dove under the covers, and lay there shaking. What was that paper? Who was Alexander talking to? And what did it have to do with him? The next morning at breakfast, Evan couldn't stop staring at Alexander. The mask was back, cold, controlled, perfect, like last night had never happened. "I spoke to your teacher," Alexander said without looking up from his newspaper. "You'll be doing a report on successful business dynasties instead, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, real legacy." "Okay," Evan said quietly. Alexander glanced at him. "You're being cooperative. That's unusual after our disagreements." "I'm just tired." "Late night?" Evan's blood went cold. "No, just couldn't sleep." Alexander returned to his paper, but Evan caught something in that sound, a note of suspicion. Did he know? Had he heard Evan in the hallway? No, impossible. The study door was closed, mostly. Still, Evan spent the rest of breakfast in terrified silence. At school, the family tree project dominated conversation. "My great-great-grandfather came from Ireland during the potato famine," Sarah Chen announced during lunch. "My grandmother was a jazz singer in the 1960s, Marcus added. "She has photos with actual famous people." Everyone had stories. Everyone had history. Except Evan. "What about you?" Sarah asked. "What did you find out?" "I'm doing a different project," Evan mumbled. "Why?" "Because my dad said so." "But don't you want to know about your family?" "More than anything," Evan thought. "It's complicated," Evan said aloud. "Because you're adopted?" The word hung in the air. Evan had never told anyone, but somehow people knew. They always knew. "Yeah," Evan said finally. "Because of that." Sarah's expression softened. "That must be hard." "It's fine." "Do you ever wonder about them, your birth parents?" "Every day. Every single day." "No," Evan lied. "Why would I? They didn't want me." "How do you know?" "Because they left me in the snow to die." The words came out harsher than he intended. The whole table went quiet. "Evan," Sarah started. "I have to go." He grabbed his lunch tray and fled to the bathroom. Inside a stall, he sat on the closed toilet lid and tried to breathe. They left me in the snow to die. Alexander had told him that much, not gently, but factually, the way he told Evan everything. "You were outside a hospital, abandoned. If I hadn't been driving by, you would have frozen to death." No emotion, just facts. But Evan had never asked the questions that mattered. Was there a note? Did it say anything? Did they explain why? And now, after seeing Alexander last night, talking to that piece of paper with such pain in his voice, Evan wondered, did Alexander know more than he was saying? Was he hiding something? The bell rang. Evan wiped his face and headed for class. But all through English and history and math, he could only think about one thing, that paper in Alexander's desk, that yellowed piece of paper that held secrets, secrets that might finally tell him who he really was and why no one had wanted him. That night, Evan made a decision. He waited until 2 a.m. when Alexander always went to bed, routine like clockwork. Waited another hour to be sure, then crept down the hallway to the study. His hands shook as he turned the doorknob. The door opened silently. Alexander kept everything well maintained, no squeaking hinges to give him away. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting shadows across the massive desk, the desk where Alexander had sat last night, holding that paper like it was made of glass and grief. Evan crossed to it, each step feeling like a betrayal. The drawer was locked. Of course it was locked. But Evan had watched Alexander open it 1,000 times, had memorized the combination he typed into the keypad on the side. 0817. Evan's hands trembled as he entered the numbers. A soft click. The drawer slid open. Inside, files, documents, and there, a small wooden box, polished smooth by years of handling. Evan lifted it out carefully. It was heavier than it looked. He opened the lid, and his whole world shattered. Inside was a piece of paper, old, yellowed, the edges torn, and written in hurried, desperate handwriting, "No one's child." Below it, something else, something that made Evan's blood run cold.
A name. Not his name. A different name. Evan Alexander Crowe. Born March 15th. And below that, in the same handwriting as the note, "If something happens to me, tell him I loved him. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him his father never stopped looking." Evan's vision blurred. Father. His father had been looking. His father had... You weren't supposed to find that. Evan spun around. Alexander stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, his face in shadow. But his voice was broken. This story is about to explode into truths that have been buried for a decade. If you're invested in Evan and Alexander, drop a comment below telling me what you think that note means, and smash that subscribe button, because the next part will break your heart before it heals it. Evan couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the man in the doorway, the man who'd raised him, controlled him, shaped every moment of his life for 10 years, the man who'd been lying to him. "Put it back." Alexander's voice was quiet, dangerous. "What is this?" Evan's voice shook. He held up the note with trembling hands. "What does this mean?" "I said put it back." "No." The word came out stronger than Evan expected. "No, you're going to tell me what this means." Alexander stepped into the room. The moonlight caught his face now, and Evan saw something there he'd never seen before. Shame. "Evan?" "It says my father was looking for me." Evan's voice rose. "It says someone loved me. But you told me I was abandoned, that no one wanted me, that you found me by accident." "Sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want answers." "Sit down." The command was absolute, reflexive. Evan's body obeyed before his mind could protest. He sat in the leather chair facing the desk, the note still clutched in his hands like a lifeline. Alexander moved to the window, his back to Evan. For a long moment, he just stood there, silhouetted against the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet, Evan almost didn't hear it. "That note isn't about you." "What?" "The note you're holding, the name written there, that's not you." "But it says Evan Alexander Crowe. That was my son. My son died 23 years ago when he was 3 months old." The room tilted. You had a son?" "Yes." "And he died?" "Yes." Evan's mind reeled. But then what does this have to do with me?" Alexander moved to the desk, pulled out the other piece of paper, the one Evan had seen first. the one that said, "No one's child." "This," Alexander said, "is what was pinned to your blanket the night I found you." He laid both pieces of paper side by side. Different paper, different ink, different handwriting, but the same phrase, "No one's child." "I don't understand," Evan whispered. Alexander sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time in 10 years, Evan saw him look old. 23 years ago, I was 20 years old, a junior at Columbia, young, arrogant, thought I knew everything. His voice was flat, reciting facts. I met a woman, Elena Martinez. She was a sophomore, art history major, beautiful, kind, everything I wasn't. He paused, fingers tracing the edge of the old note. We dated for 6 months. Then she got pregnant. Her family was furious, traditional, Catholic. They wanted her to give the baby up for adoption. His jaw tightened. I wanted to keep it, thought I could handle it, thought money could solve everything. What happened? Elena refused to give up the baby. We got married at City Hall. I got an apartment, started working 2 jobs while finishing school. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I thought we were building something, a family, a future. But I was stupid and 20 and thought I could do everything myself. Elena had complications during the pregnancy, preeclampsia. The doctors warned us, said she needed bed rest, monitoring, specialized care. His hands clenched into fists. I didn't listen, thought they were exaggerating, thought I knew better. I was drowning in student loans, working 90-hour weeks, trying to keep us afloat. And Elena, she was scared, so scared, but I kept telling her everything would be fine. Was it? No. The word was a barely whisper. She went into labor 2 months early. I was at work, didn't have my phone. By the time I got to the hospital, he stopped, swallowed hard. She was dying. They did an emergency C-section, saved the baby, but Elena, his voice cracked, Elena died on the table, and I was in the fucking parking lot because I'd stopped to take a business call. Evan felt tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry." "Don't." Alexander's voice was sharp. "Don't apologize for something that was my fault." "But it wasn't." "It was. I failed her, failed to protect her, failed to be there when she needed me most." He picked up the old note, the one about his son. "They brought me the baby, Evan, named him after Elena's father. He was so small, barely 4 pounds. They said he'd be okay, said babies that size survive all the time now. But he didn't? He survived 3 months, 3 months in the NICU, hooked up to machines, fighting for every breath. And Alexander's voice broke completely. I couldn't do it, couldn't watch him struggle, couldn't sit in that hospital every day watching my son suffer while I worked to pay the bills that were burying me." Evan stared at him, seeing a man he'd never known existed beneath the ice. I started taking longer shifts, staying late at work, telling myself he was better off with the nurses, with people who knew what they were doing. Shame flooded his face. I abandoned him, not physically, but emotionally. I just checked out. What happened to him? He died on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m., heart failure. I wasn't there. I was in a board meeting I thought was too important to miss. He laughed bitterly. The nurses called me, told me to come. I said I'd be there in an hour. By the time I arrived, he was already gone. The silence was crushing. They gave me his things, a blanket, a stuffed bear, and this note. He held up the paper. The nurses had written it as a joke, a bitter joke, because I was never there. No one's child, they wrote, because I'd made him no one's. I'd had a son, and I'd abandoned him through my own cowardice. Evan couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was hearing. I made a promise that day.
Alexander said. Standing over his tiny casket, I swore that if I ever got another chance, if I ever saw another child in danger, I wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't fail, wouldn't let my fear or weakness cost another life. Understanding crashed over Evan like a wave. That's why you stopped, that night in the snow. That's why you didn't drive past. I saw the note pinned to your blanket. 3 words, the same 3 words the nurses had written about my son, and I knew, his voice shook, I knew this was my second chance, the universe giving me one more opportunity to not be a coward. So you took me. I claimed you, yes. To replace him? No. Alexander looked at him directly for the first time. Not to replace him. Nothing could replace him, but to save you. To finally do the right thing, to prove to myself that I was capable of being more than the coward who let his family die. Evan's mind spun. But the note on my blanket, who wrote it? Why did it say the same thing? I don't know. Alexander's face hardened. I've spent 10 years trying to find out, hired investigators, searched hospital records, looked for any connection to Elena's family. Nothing. It's either the cruelest coincidence in history, or what?
Or someone knew about my past, knew about Evan, and used that knowledge to make sure I'd stop. Why would someone do that? That's what I've been trying to find out. Alexander stood, paced to the window. Your birth was off the books. No hospital records, no prenatal care. Someone went to great lengths to make sure you didn't officially exist. Why? Protection, maybe, or hiding you from someone. He turned. The handwriting on your note was rushed, desperate. Whoever left you there was scared. The words might have been deliberate, a message meant specifically for me, or they might have meant exactly what they said, that you were being erased, made into no one. Evan looked down at the note in his hands. Tell him his father never stopped looking. My real father, he said slowly, the one who wrote this note about your son. You think he might be? I don't know. Elena's father died when she was 16, but the handwriting doesn't match any family members I investigated. Alexander's jaw clenched. Or someone left your note knowing those words would trigger me, knowing I'd see my past in your future, knowing I wouldn't be able to walk away. That's insane. Yes, which is why I've never told you any of this. Alexander moved back to the desk. Because either I'm being paranoid and seeing connections that don't exist, or someone orchestrated your abandonment to manipulate me. Either way, you're safer not knowing. Safer? Evan's voice rose. You've been lying to me for 10 years. You've raised me like some kind of project, never showing emotion, never explaining anything, treating me like I'm a business deal instead of your son. Because I can't lose you two. The words exploded out of Alexander. Don't you understand? I loved Elena. I loved Evan, and I destroyed them both through my weakness, through caring too much and acting too little, through being human. He grabbed Evan's shoulders, his grip tight. So I made you strong, made you capable, made sure you'd never need me the way Elena needed me. Because if you don't need me, I can't fail you. If you're self-sufficient and capable and strong enough to survive anything, then when I eventually screw this up, and I will screw it up, you'll be okay. Tears streamed down his face now. I'm doing better this time. He whispered, echoing the words Evan had heard last night. I'm keeping you alive, keeping you safe, keeping you from needing anyone, even me, because that's all I know how to do. Evan stared at this man, this stranger wearing Alexander's face, and felt something shift in his chest. All these years, he'd thought the distance was because Alexander didn't care, but it was the opposite. Alexander cared so much it terrified him. You're not doing better, Evan said quietly. Alexander flinched like he'd been struck.
You're making the same mistake. You abandoned your son emotionally because you were scared, and you're abandoning me the same way. I'm keeping you safe. I'm keeping you alone, Evan's voice cracked. I have no friends, no life outside this house and your rules. I'm 10 years old, and I don't know how to be a kid because you've trained me to be a machine, just like you. That's not, yes, it is. Tears poured down Evan's face. You saved my life that night, but you've been too scared to actually live it with me, to be my father instead of just my guardian, to love me instead of just protecting me. The words hung between them like a chasm. Alexander's hands fell from Evan's shoulders. He stepped back, his face crumbling. I don't know how. I don't know how to do this, how to be what you need. I'm broken, Evan. I've been broken for 23 years, and I'm terrified if I let myself love you the way a father should, I'll fail you the way I failed them. Evan stood, walked around the desk, and hugged him. Alexander went rigid, completely still. You're not failing me by being scared, Evan said into his chest. You're failing me by not trying. For a long moment, Alexander didn't move. Then, slowly, carefully, like he was handling something precious and fragile, he wrapped his arms around Evan and held on. They stood there in the darkness, two people who'd both been abandoned in different ways, finally holding on to each other. I'm sorry, Alexander whispered. I'm so sorry. I know. I'll try. I'll try to be better, to be human? Alexander laughed, the sound wet with tears. Yeah, human. They pulled apart slowly. So what now? Evan asked. Alexander looked at the notes on the desk, both pieces of his past side by side. Now, he said, we find out the truth about who left you, why they used those words, and what they wanted from me. Together? Alexander met his eyes, really met them. Together. The truth is out, but it's only the beginning. These two have 10 years of walls to tear down and a mystery that spans 23 years to solve. Comment below, do you think Evan's abandonment was really a coincidence or was it planned? And hit that subscribe button because the final act will reveal secrets that neither of them are ready for.
2 weeks later. The investigator's name was Sarah Chin, no relation to Evan's classmate, but just as sharp. She sat across from Alexander and Evan in the study, a folder thick with documents spread across the desk. I'll be honest, she said, this is the strangest case I've worked in 20 years. Strange how? Alexander asked. Strange as in someone went to extraordinary lengths to erase every trace of this child's origin. She pulled out a photograph. This is the clinic where Evan was found, St. Catherine's, closed down 6 months after that night. Coincidence? Maybe, but the ownership records are buried under 3 shell companies, the medical staff scattered to different states, and the security footage from that night? She shook her head. Conveniently corrupted. Evan leaned forward. Someone deleted it? Someone made sure there was nothing to find. Sarah pulled out another document, but I dug deeper, found the nurse who worked the front desk that night. Took me 8 calls and a trip to Phoenix, but I found her. And? Alexander's voice was tight. And she remembers something. Not the baby, she never saw the baby, but she remembers a woman, early 20s, Hispanic, pregnant, came in around 9 p.m. asking about services. Alexander went very still. Hispanic? Yes, the nurse said she seemed terrified, kept looking over her shoulder, asked about anonymous delivery options. The nurse told her they didn't do that. It was a walk-in clinic, not a hospital. The woman left. That's the last time anyone saw her. What did she look like? Sarah pulled out a sketch. The nurse worked with a police artist. This is what she remembers. Alexander took the paper, and the blood drained from his face. Alex? Evan looked at him. What is it? Alexander couldn't speak. He was staring at the sketch like it was a ghost.
Because it was. The face staring back at him was Elena's. Same dark eyes, same delicate features, same expression of barely controlled fear. "It's not possible," he whispered. "What's not possible?" Sarah asked. "This woman, she looks exactly like—" He stopped, swallowed. "Like someone I knew, someone who died 23 years ago." Sarah's expression sharpened. "Who?" "My wife." The word fell like a stone. Evan stared. "But you said she died when your son was born." "She did. I was there. I saw." Alexander's hand shook. "I saw her body." "Are you sure?" Sarah asked gently. Alexander stopped. His mind reeled back 23 years. "I was in shock. The doctors told me she was gone. I saw her in the bed, not moving. They pulled a sheet over her face. I couldn't stay, couldn't watch them take her away. I signed papers, left, went to see my son in the NICU. "But you never saw her after they covered her face." "No, I couldn't. The funeral was closed casket. Her family arranged everything. I was barely functional, just signed where they told me to sign." Sarah leaned forward. "Mr. Crowe, is it possible your wife didn't die that night?"
The question hung in the air like smoke. "That's insane," Alexander said, but his voice wavered. "Is it? Someone with significant resources could fake a death. Medical records can be altered, especially in chaos situations like emergency deliveries. But why? Why would Elena fake her death? Why would her family help her? Maybe she wasn't faking it. Maybe someone else was." Sarah pulled out another document. "I looked into Elena's family. Her father was dead, but her mother, Maria Martinez, was alive until 5 years ago. She had a sister, Carmen Martinez. I met Carmen once at the wedding. She hated me. With good reason, apparently. Carmen was involved with some dangerous people, drug trafficking, money laundering. She disappeared around the same time Elena died. No trace of her for 22 years. Alexander's mind raced. "You think Carmen had something to do with Elena's death?" "I think Carmen might have had something to do with Elena's life." Sarah's eyes were sharp. "What if Elena didn't die? What if Carmen helped her disappear, helped her fake her death to get away from something or someone?" "From me?" Alexander's voice was hollow. "Maybe not from you specifically, but from the life she was trapped in. Young, pregnant, married to a man drowning in ambition and debt, a family that disapproved, medical complications that could kill her." Sarah shrugged. "Maybe she saw an opportunity and took it." "And lived for 23 years in hiding?" Evan's voice was quiet. "Why would she do that?" "Because someone was looking for her," Alexander said slowly. "Someone dangerous enough that death seemed like the better option." Sarah nodded. "That's my theory. And if Elena survived, if she had help disappearing, then it's possible that she had another child," Alexander finished. "That she got pregnant again, that she—" He looked at Evan, really looked at him. Dark hair, dark eyes, delicate features that could belong to either gender at 10 years old, but that reminded him suddenly, painfully, of Elena's face. "No," he whispered. "Mr. Crowe, you're saying Evan is Elena's son?" "I'm saying it's possible. The timeline fits. If Elena survived and went into hiding, if she had another relationship, another pregnancy, then why abandon him?" Alexander's voice rose. "Why leave him in the snow with that note? Why not keep him, hide him like she hid herself?" Maybe she couldn't anymore. Maybe whoever she was hiding from found her. Maybe leaving Evan outside that clinic with that specific note in that specific place where you would find him, maybe that was her only way to keep him safe. The room spun. Evan gripped the edge of the desk. "Are you saying my mother might have been Alexander's wife? That his dead son was my half-brother?" "I'm saying the evidence points to something bigger than coincidence." Sarah pulled out one final document.
I ran a DNA test, used samples from Evan's medical records, and compared them to genetic markers I pulled from Elena Martinez's family members. Alexander's heart stopped. How did you... I have my methods, and the results are preliminary, but... She slid the paper across the desk. There's a 47% probability of shared ancestry. Not parent-child, but aunt-nephew, or possibly half-sibling if the genetic markers are skewed by generation gaps. Alexander stared at the numbers. 47%. Not definitive, not proof, but possible. This can't be real, he said. It might not be, but if it is, Sarah's voice was gentle, then Elena didn't just leave you one son, she left you two, and she did everything in her power to make sure the second one survived. That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. His mother might be alive. His mother might be Alexander's dead wife. His mother might have left him in the snow not out of cruelty, but out of love, to save him from something worse. The door opened quietly. Alexander stood silhouetted in the doorway. Can't sleep either? No. Alexander walked in, sat on the edge of the bed, something he'd never done before. For a moment, they just sat in silence. What if it's true? Evan finally asked. What if she's really my mother? Then we'll find her. What if we can't? We will. How can you be sure? Alexander looked at him. Because I failed her once, I won't fail her again, and I won't fail you. But if she's alive, if she left me, Evan's voice cracked. Why didn't she come back? Why didn't she find me? Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she's been watching from a distance, making sure you're safe. Maybe leaving you with me was the bravest thing she ever did. Or maybe she just didn't want me. No, Alexander's voice was firm. That note, no one's child, I thought it was cruel. But what if it wasn't? What if it meant you belonged to no one else, that you were free, that whoever was chasing her couldn't claim you because you didn't exist on paper? Evan thought about that. Like she was erasing me to save me? Exactly. That's a pretty elaborate theory. I've built a fortune on elaborate theories. Alexander almost smiled. Besides, she chose that clinic. She chose that night. She chose to pin that note where I'd see it. If it was Elena, and I'm not saying it was, but if it was, she knew I drove that route, knew I'd be working late, knew I'd stop. How could she know that? Because she knew me, knew I was a creature of habit, knew that guilt had made me predictable. He paused, and she knew that if I saw those 3 words, no one's child, I wouldn't be able to walk away, not after what happened to our son. The pieces clicked together in Evan's mind. You were giving me to you, he whispered. Maybe. But why not just contact you? Why not ask you to help? Because asking puts both of us in danger, but an anonymous abandonment, a child left in the snow with no connection to anyone, that gives us both plausible deniability. I'm just a good Samaritan who happened to be in the right place. You're just an abandoned baby with no history. And whoever she was running from wouldn't suspect we were connected. Exactly. Evan processed this. You really think she's alive? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Alexander stood, and when I do, I'm going to ask her one question. What? Why she didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. His voice was filled with pain, with regret, with love that survived 2 decades and 2 sons and 2 versions of the same tragedy. Evan reached out, grabbed his hand. You didn't fail her, he said quietly. You were 20, scared, drowning. You did the best you could. It wasn't enough. Maybe it was. Maybe you surviving, becoming this, was exactly what she needed you to become, so you'd be ready, so you'd be strong enough to save me. Alexander looked down at their joined hands. When did you get so wise? I learned from you. The important stuff, anyway.
The other stuff, the cold, distant, emotionally unavailable stuff, we're going to work on that." Alexander laughed. Actually laughed. It was a rusty sound, like a door that hadn't been opened in years, but it was real. "Deal," he said. 3 months later, Sarah Chen found Carmen Martinez in a hospice in Albuquerque. She was dying, stage 4 lung cancer. 3 weeks, maybe a month left. Alexander and Evan flew out the next day. The hospice was small, quiet, filled with the kind of peace that comes at the end of things. Carmen was in room 7. She looked nothing like the woman in the old wedding photos. Age and illness had hollowed her out, leaving behind someone fragile and small. But her eyes, when they landed on Alexander, were sharp as knives. "You," she rasped. "You found him." Alexander pulled up a chair. Evan stood behind him, nervous. "Where is she?" Alexander asked quietly. "Dead. 7 years now." The word hit like a bullet. "How?" "Cancer. Same as me. Runs in the family." Carmen coughed, the sound wet and painful. She fought it for 2 years, refused treatment because she didn't want to risk exposure, died alone in a motel in Tucson. Alexander's hands clenched. "She was alive? All those years she was alive and you never told me." "She made me promise, made me swear I'd never contact you, never tell you what really happened." "What did happen?" Carmen's eyes drifted to Evan. "You look like her, like Elena. Same eyes." "Is he—" Alexander couldn't finish the question. "Her son?" "Yes." The confirmation should have felt triumphant, should have felt like answers. Instead, it felt like grief. "Why?" Alexander's voice broke. "Why did she fake her death? Why hide from me?" Carmen was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because I made her." Alexander went very still. "What?" "The people I worked for. Bad people, Mr. Crowe. Very bad people. I'd owed them money, a lot of money. When they came to collect, I didn't have it." She coughed again. "So they gave me a choice. Pay with money or pay with family." Horror dawned on Alexander's face. "They wanted Elena. They wanted your son, wanted to hold him for ransom, force you to pay my debt." Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "I told Elena, warned her. She was in labor, complications happening, and I told her what was coming, told her they'd take the baby as soon as he was born. So she faked her death. I helped, had connections with a doctor who owed me favors. We made it look like she died during delivery, falsified the records, got her out of the hospital while you were with the baby in the NICU." Carmen's voice was thick with guilt. "I saved her life, but I destroyed yours. My son died." "I know. And Elena," a sob escaped her. "Elena never forgave herself, never forgave me. She wanted to come back, wanted to tell you the truth, but by then the people I owed were looking for her, for both of you. If she'd returned, you'd both be dead. So she stayed in hiding for 22 years, moved constantly, never stayed anywhere longer than a few months, never used her real name, never had a real life. Until she met someone," Evan said quietly. Carmen nodded. "A good man, didn't ask questions, didn't care about her past. They were together for 3 years. Then she got pregnant with you. And the man died. Car accident. Bad luck, bad timing. Elena was alone again, pregnant again, and the people looking for her, they'd never stopped. They came to her apartment. She barely escaped." Carmen's breathing was labored now. She knew she couldn't keep running, not with a baby, not anymore. So she came to me, asked me to do the one thing she thought might save you. "Leave him with me," Alexander said. "Yes, she'd kept tabs on you, knew where you lived, knew your routines, knew you'd become everything she'd hoped you'd become, strong, successful, capable of protecting a child in ways she never could." "The note," Evan said. "Why that phrase?" "Because she knew it would make you stop, knew those 3 words would destroy you and save her baby at the same time." Carmen looked at Alexander. She was right, wasn't it? Alexander couldn't speak. "She watched you," Carmen continued, "for 3 years after she left him,
had someone tracking you, making sure he took good care of him, making sure he was safe. Then the cancer got too bad and she—" The words dissolved into coughing. A nurse appeared, but Carmen waved her away. "She loved you," she told Alexander, "never stopped, and she loved that baby." She looked at Evan. "Loved you enough to let you go, to give you the father she knew you'd need, the father she'd always wanted for her first son." Tears streamed down Evan's face. Alexander stood, moved to the window. His shoulders shook.
"I spent 23 years hating myself," he said quietly, "thinking I'd failed her, failed my son, built my entire life around making sure I'd never be that weak again. And all that time she was alive, suffering, alone. She wanted it that way, said you deserved better than a woman running from ghosts. I deserved the truth. Truth gets people killed, Mr. Crowe. Lies kept you both alive." Alexander turned. "Is there anything left? Anything of hers?" Carmen reached under her pillow with shaking hands, pulled out a small envelope. "She wrote this before she died. Made me promise to give it to you if you ever found him, if you ever figured it out." Alexander took the envelope like it might explode. Inside, a letter and a photograph. The photo showed Elena, older, thinner, but unmistakably her, holding a newborn baby, holding Evan. She was smiling, crying, looking at the camera like she was trying to memorize every detail. On the back, in her handwriting, "His name is Evan, like our son, like the father he deserves." Alexander's knees buckled. Evan caught him. They sank to the floor together, holding the photograph, holding each other. Carmen watched from her bed. "She did love you," she whispered, "both of you, more than anything." "Then why didn't she come back?" Evan's voice was raw. "When I was safe, when Alexander had adopted me, why didn't she tell us?" "Because by then she was dying, and she didn't want you to watch her go, didn't want your last memory of her to be death." Carmen's eyes closed. She'd already given you a father who'd survive anything. She didn't need to give you a mother who wouldn't. The room was silent except for the hum of medical equipment. Finally, Alexander opened the letter, read it silently, then read it aloud, his voice breaking. "My love, if you're reading this, you found him. You saved him. I knew you would. I'm sorry for every lie, every year of pain, every moment I let you believe you'd failed. You didn't fail me. You saved me. And when I couldn't save our son, you did something better. You became the man who could save this one. Evan, our second chance. He's yours. Not because of blood or obligation, but because you chose him. Because when everyone else walked past, you stopped. You didn't find him because he was no one's child. You found him because he was always meant to be yours. Love him. Forgive yourself. Live the life we never got to have. And know that wherever I am, I'm watching. I'm proud. I'm free. Tell him I loved him. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him his mother never stopped fighting to give him the father he deserved. All my love, Elena." Alexander folded the letter carefully, stood, looked at Evan, this boy who'd been no one's child and now was everything. "You didn't find me because I was no one's child. You found me because I was yours." Alexander pulled him close. "Yes, you were always mine. From the moment I saw that note, from the moment I knew I had a second chance, you were mine. And you're mine," Evan said. They stood there, father and son, bound not by blood, but by something stronger, choice, sacrifice, and love that had survived death itself. Behind them, Carmen smiled. She'd be happy, so happy. The note was never destroyed. Instead, it was framed, both notes, side by side, and hung in Alexander's study. No one's child, and no one's child. 2 pieces of paper, 2 sons, 2 chances, 1 story of redemption. Evan was 13 when they finally finished Elena's story, when they tracked down everyone she'd helped, everyone she'd saved by disappearing. Turned out she'd been protecting more than just Alexander and Evan. She'd been protecting 12 other families from Carmen's mistakes. Alexander made sure every one of them knew what Elena had sacrificed, made sure her name was remembered not as a woman who'd abandoned her family, but as a hero who'd saved them all. And he made sure Evan knew that his mother had loved him enough to let him go, knew that sometimes the greatest love looks like abandonment, knew that being no one's child had made him everyone's son, Elena's, Alexander's, and his own. On Evan's 14th birthday, Alexander did something he'd never done before. He took the day off work, completely off. No phone, no email, no business. Just him and Evan. They went to Coney Island, rode the cyclone, ate too much cotton candy, laughed until their sides hurt. And when the sun set, they sat on the beach and watched the waves. "Thank you," Evan said quietly. "For what?" "For stopping that night. For not driving past." Alexander wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "Thank you for being worth stopping for." They sat there as the sky turned dark and the stars came out. 2 people who'd both been abandoned, 2 people who'd both been saved, 2 people who'd chosen each other. And that, Alexander realized, was the real story. Not the tragedy, not the loss, but the choice to love anyway, to try anyway, to believe that no one, absolutely no one, is beyond saving, not even yourself. If this story touched your heart, don't just walk away. Hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below, what does family mean to you? Because at the end of the day, family isn't about blood. It's not about where you came from. It's about who chooses to stay, who chooses to fight, who chooses to love you when the whole world says you're no one's child. Thank you for being part of this journey, and remember, you're not no one's child either. You're exactly where you're meant to be. Until next time,